Welcome, dear students, to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. K.S. Nagaraja. I will be teaching the course on historical linguistics. In this particular module, I will be talking about semantic change. Previously, you have already learned from the grammatical changes how the grammatical categories of a language can change in due course of time. In this particular course, we are looking at a very nebulous type of item or area, that is meaning. Meaning is not constant in any language. Languages are always in a state of flux. So meaning is most difficult to catch. Maybe that's why the first generation linguists kept semantics away from the core linguistics. In this course, you are going to study how the form and the meaning are combined to get a linguistic sign. Wherever there is a shift in either in the meaning or in the form, there will be semantic change. Semantic change concerns the changes in lexicon or vocabulary, the most variable and shifting part of any language. Semantic shifts are very closely related to the life and customs of a speech community. They are somewhat free of the mechanisms that may be peculiar to language systems, but are by no means completely independent of linguistic explanations. Studies in semantic changes so far have not resulted in the formulation of abstract models or even in the reasoned educated guesswork that pervades the study of phonological, morphological, and syntactic change. As we saw in the previous section, for instance, in analogical change, we have laws provided by scholars. In order to illustrate what happens in semantic change, see the following diagram proposed by the famous Swiss linguist Ferdinand de Saussure. A linguistic sign, or every linguistic sign, is made up of two parts: signified, that means which has a content, and a signifier, which is a form or made of sounds. So a stretch of sounds have to be there to get formed, to give rise to a word, and that word should convey something, some idea, some concept, some content should be there, lexical, grammatical, whatever it may be. So that way we have a signified and signifier relation, and this is called linguistic sign. In terms of this diagram, when a speech community has an idea or object, it wants to talk about the signified. Symbolizing it will be an accompanying collection of sounds, the signifier, in the vocabulary or lexicon of the language. Thus, when a new signified enters a culture, it will be accompanied by a signifier in the language and vice versa. When a signified is no longer in use, the signifier will tend to disappear. These two processes are called appearance and obsolescence of lexical items. According to Ferdinand de Saussure, semantic change takes place when there is a shift in the relationship between signified and the signifier. Here, concept of associated fields can be brought in. It means that every word occurs in a semantic field. In fact, that we are going to look at that in some detail below. This can be studied from the point of causes, mechanisms, factors which facilitate semantic change. One, semantic association. Shift due to contact. An interesting case is in English. Beads, bead or beads first meant prayer. Old English, Gebet means prayer. Roman Catholic Church uses this term in terms of counting of beads, that means in prayer. It included to count one's beads, it included both prayer and bead. The shift of meaning of prayer to bead is due to semantic contact. When we look at the words and how they change, we see that the forms which occur in some sort of a association, that is connected forms semantically, they tend to be stronger and they do not change. The forms like, for instance, connected with residence or accommodation like hut, home, house, etc., they tend to continue for longer period than forms which occur in isolation. For instance, a word like prayer earlier meant something, and because of the association of the church, it got a different meaning. In fact, even the use of beads came to be associated with prayer. So this association not only maintains the forms and also the meanings, but many times extends the meaning from one to the other. In fact, the association, like for instance, people whose profession is seafaring, when they reach a place, Adripared it would be, but then finally that form which meant reaching the shore became in a way modified to a general one, reaching anywhere. In fact, here we see that the forms are all connected in society, and any change, any modification will have impact on the vocabulary. When for one reason or another the link is broken, a word is more free to wander. The breaking of this link usually happens when a root word drops out of the language, or when the morphological process linking a base and a derived form either disappears or ceases to be productive. So what happens with the forms is sometimes a form may lose all its associatedness or associated forms and becomes isolated. When that happens, in due course of time, that form also gets lost due to non-usability of that. For instance, in Old English, there was a form called like quichu, which meant quick or speedy, but it's a descendant of Old English word quichu, means alive, so the form is totally different. And at the same time, in Old English, there was another form almost competitive, quichian, meaning to be alive or to live. So because of the presence of the second one, the first word quick lost its meaning, lost out because of the second one, and later on it got totally dropped from that concept. For example, Latin noun tectum means roof. Tum, a suffix, originally became non-productive in classical Latin itself, so it is restricted to this word itself. Third, social groups. Social groups are very important in maintaining the language, maintaining the vocabulary of a language. And within social groups, we may consider the presence of subgroups. Words in polysemous situation, that is, social or professional contexts need to be specified. For example, when a word is used in different contexts or in different social groups, in specialized contexts, they convey different meanings. For instance, the words root could be a physical one, a material, an object, whereas root of the issue, there the cause, the fundamental cause is concerned, the square root of something, etc. The root can be used in different contexts with different meanings. So the social groups are very important there, how they maintain them. Similarly, bar, station, bank, etc. One can consider. The way semantic change in this sense would work is that a word with meaning X would enter a particular subculture where it would acquire the meaning Y. It would then re-emerge into the general speech community with this new meaning. History of the verb arrive, borrowed from French, is an interesting case. Etymologically, we can trace the word back to a forum, adripare, to reach the shore, which in turn is composed of three Latin elements. Ad means to, rip is bank, shore of sea or river, plus are, a verbal ending. Presumably, in a sailor's jargon, reach the shore could extend its meaning to reach any place, because when a sailor got to the shore, he got to where he was going. This word then emerges into the general speech community with the new meaning of reach the place you are going to, and is not limited to reaching land from the sea. The basis for semantic change. Polysemy and semantic overlap are the pervasive features of language. Associated with these is the fact that there may be variations in the range of meaning of given words from inclusive to exclusive. At the same time, total synonymy is rarely tolerated, there usually being some degree of semantic differentiations. Semantic shift will not take place abruptly throughout a speech community, but must take place gradually through various associations of meanings and the phenomenon of polysemy. Types of semantic change: there could be extension of a meaning of a word, narrowing, figurative use, subreption, meliorization, pejorization. We look at this in the following. Extension also means widening in possibility of context. In semantic changes involving widening, the range of meanings of a word increases so that the word can be used in more contexts. Changes from more concrete to more abstract meanings fit this category. Dog, earlier, this is English word dog, first appeared with a more specific meaning of a specific powerful breed of dog, which generalized to include all breeds or races of dogs. In Hindi, pursue, day before yesterday, in fact, it is pursue is from Sanskrit parashvaha, but in Sanskrit parashvaha meant only day after tomorrow, but here this word has been extended to day before yesterday, besides keeping day after tomorrow. So there is an extension of meaning. Similarly, river names Ganga, Kaveri, earlier being specific rivers, now are used to mean rivers in general. Picture formerly was something painted, Now more general, for example, picture taken by a camera. Virtue was a quality one expected in a man, so vir. But now it is moral excellence. It can be used to anyone, virtuous woman. Like this, there are many cases. One interesting case is salary. Salary is a wage of any kind, but originally it is from Latin, where salarium was wages of a soldier. Soldier's allotment of salt was the first one, so it has been generalized now. Salary is wage of any kind. Narrowing is the opposite of broadening. It also means reduction in context. In semantic narrowing, the range of meanings is decreased so that a word can be used appropriately only in few contexts than it could before the change. Changes of more abstract meanings to more concrete ones fit this category. For instance, Greek myth. Earlier, myth meant story in general, but now a special kind of story whose truth exists largely in imagination. Similarly, English ghost meant spirit. It could be Holy Spirit or evil spirit, but now it is only one, it's only evil spirit. Further, English deer, which meant animal in general, now it is one of the commonest wild animals. Similar to deer, we see in Sanskrit mriga. Mriga meant animal. So Mrigendra is king of animals, but now mriga means deer only. Exactly similar to the English situation. Next one, figurative speech. Usages like old age, evening of life, we give rise to this kind of situation. Almost any word can be used figuratively on a given occasion, but when the metaphor sticks and comes into general usage, the word can be said to have acquired a new meaning. If the old meaning still continues primarily, the new meaning may seem figurative. If not, the figurative meaning becomes the primary meaning of the word. While extension and narrowing of meaning are relatively unconscious processes which very gradually expand or limit the reference of a word, the semantic change due to figurative use of language in its early stages involves a more conscious and deliberate transfer serving aesthetic purposes or poetic purposes. For instance, bottleneck. Bottleneck, usually, if we imagine a bottle, usually the necks will be smaller compared to the rest of the bottle. So when we try to pour the liquid of the bottle out, naturally it comes with difficulty because the neck is small. A similar situation we see, a broad road suddenly becomes narrow, by which the traffic will be forced to slow down, which creates traffic jams, is such a situation. So a concept of bottleneck can be employed there, figuratively speaking. Turkish word yurt. In Old Turkic, yurt means simply a kind of tent which Central Asian nomads use. In the modern language of Turkey, however, the primary meaning of the word is country, fatherland. The figurative use involves seeing the home of the individual family, the tent, as symbolic or similar to the home of the whole nation. Metaphor, metonymy, etc. Metaphor, the definition of metaphor from Greek metaphora, transference, vary and often vague. Metaphor involves understanding or experiencing one kind of thing in terms of another kind, of thing thought somehow to be similar in some way. Metaphor in semantic change involves extensions in the meaning of a word that suggest a semantic similarity or connection between the new sense and the original one. Metaphor is considered a major factor in semantic change. It has been likened to analogy, where one thing is conceptualized in terms of another with a leap across semantic domains. The semantic change of grasp, that means seize to understand, thus can be seen as such a leap across semantic domains from the physical domain, seizing, to the mental domain, comprehension. We can use a given form to refer to some new meaning by implicitly or explicitly claiming a semantic relationship or similarity between its established and its intended new meaning. For example, this statement was clear to us. The water is clear. The statement was clear as water. Closely similar to, connected to metaphor is metonymy. Metonymy, from Greek, metanomia means transformation of the name, is a change in the meaning of a word so that it comes to include additional senses which were not originally present but which are closely associated with the word's original meaning, although the conceptual association between the old and the new meaning may lack precision. A much repeated example is English cheek, fleshy side of the face below the eye. Old English cisse meant jaw, jawbone, which over time shifted to the sense of modern English cheek. Third one, synecdoche, from Greek synecdoche, inclusion, often considered a kind of metonymy, involves a part to whole relationship. Here, a term with more comprehensive meaning is used to refer to a less comprehensive meaning, or vice versa. That is, a part or quality is used to refer to the whole, or the whole is used to refer to part. For example, hand, which was extended to include also hired hand, employed worker. A special kind of synecdoche is displacement, also called ellipsis, where one word absorbs part or all of the meaning of another word with which it is linked in a phrasal constituent, usually adjective noun. For example, contact or contacts from contact lens, and a capital from a capital city, where the notion of city has been absorbed into the word capital. In English, capital is a loan from French. Some see this also as a kind of syntactic change. In the sorts of semantic changes considered so far, focus is on changes in the meaning of words whose phonetic form mostly remains unaltered. There are cases of lexical replacement where a meaning remains but the phonetic realization of it is changed in some way, usually by substituting some other lexical item which had other denotations of its own before the change. Thus, lexical replacements involve more than meaning shifts, although changes in the meaning may also be involved. Taboo is one of the important types. Changes in vocabulary involving responses to taboo and obscenity and euphemism are found in most of the languages. For example, ass is not accepted, so in that place donkey is used in America. in dialects of English where bloody is obscene, what is generally called a bloody nose in North America becomes blood nose or bleeding nose in order to avoid the taboo form. Changes involving euphemism, the replacement of words regarded as unpleasant, are part of this type. Next, hyperbole. It means exaggeration. From Greek, hyperbole means excess. It involves shifts in meaning due to exaggeration by overstatement. For example, English words terribly, horribly, awfully, and such similar words today mean little more than very, a generic intensifier. By overstatement, they have come to have no real connection with their origins, terror, horror, or awe, etc. Lithotes, that means understatement, from Greek lithotes, smoothness, plainness, is exaggeration by understatement, such as of no small importance when very important is meant. In many languages, examples of lithotes are found involving verbs meaning to kill. Next, semantic shift due to contact. In a language, in a Mayan language called Quiche, Kek originally meant deer. However, with the introduction of horses with European contact, Kek came to mean horse. Alteration of meaning. A camp is a cottage for summer relaxation. Plume, feather, becomes pen for a writing implement. Bengali, adar is affection, whereas in Gujarat, adar is respect. Semantic changes of some surprising etymologies we can observe. The words here, for instance, villain earlier meant farm laborer. Now we know what a villain is. From fault finding becomes taxation. A man's hat becomes bonnet. Equipment becomes furniture. Another type is subreption. Basically, it is the continued existence of a signifier while the signified changes within some real or some intellectual way, that is, in terms of understanding, without a disruption or sharp break in the history of the word concerned. For example, artillery, this is from Middle English artillerie, to refer to the physical means of ground warfare. Catapults, crossbow, mortars, howitzers, cannons. Earlier, in the Middle Ages, in the warfare they used to use catapults, crossbows, but now they use mortars, howitzers, cannons. Even then, they are all come under the category artillery. So the concept of house, book, etc. are similar. Another type of semantic change is meliorization, that means elevation of meaning. A word having a negative meaning becomes positive in this type of change. In Old English, knight was boy or slave. In New English, knight is a highly respected personality, nobility, for instance. Similarly, in Old English, pratik means crafty, sly. Now it has become pretty, a positive meaning. The opposite of that is pejorization or degeneration. A word with positive meaning gets a negative value. For example, English, we have in Old English, nafa, a youth, child with a positive meaning, came to become a rogue. Knave means rogue, which was so we see that it is highly negative in its connotation. The above classification of semantic changes shows that they are not necessarily distinct from one another. Rather, some of them overlap and intersect. For this reason, some scholars consider narrowing and widening to be the principal kinds of semantic change, with others as mere subtypes of these two. For instance, a semantic change could involve widening, degeneration, and metonymy. Attempts to explain semantic change. Many scholars have called for a search for regularities and explanations in semantic change, and some general tendencies have been discussed and some generalizations proposed. A general mechanism of semantic change was believed to be the associative patterns of human thought, and thus traditional approaches to meaning change typically had a psychological cognitive orientation, though social context and pragmatic factors were emphasized by others. All of these factors play a role in more recent work on semantic change. Now, scholars recognize that semantic change must go through a stage of polysemy, where a word has more than one meaning. Thus, in a historical shift, a word might expand its sphere of reference to take on additional readings, becoming polysemous. At later stage, a polysemous form may lose one or more of its meanings, so a word starts out with an original meaning, then acquires additional multiple meaning. Schematically, this can be represented in three stages, beginning with form which has meaning A. Stage A has only A. Stage 2, A gets both A and B. Stage 3, it becomes 3. Some illustration. The word write in English, in stage 1, write meant to cut, score, compare the German cognate write to tear, split. In stage 2, the meaning was extended to include both to cut, scratch, and also to write. The connection is through runic writing, which was carved or scratched on wood and stone. This stage is attested in Old English written, to write, to cut. In stage 3, we see the second meaning becomes primary, the first meaning is lost. It is illustrated by modern English write, meaning to write only, where the sense of to cut or to scratch has been lost. This view recognizes, at least implicitly and often explicitly, an intervening stage of polysemy as necessary in semantic changes. More recent work concentrates on the general directionality observed for some kind of semantic changes, and attempts based on these are being made to elaborate a more explanatory approach, one which might predict possible and impossible changes or directions of change. Some general claims about semantic changes which have been formulated are the following. Semantically related words often undergo parallel semantic shifts. For example, various words which meant rapidly in Old English and Middle English shifted their meaning to immediately, as with Old English sifte, rapidly, and German, rapidly, eagerly, both of which changed the meaning to immediately in about 1300. Second, phonetic similarity, especially cases of phonetic identity or homophony, can lead to shifts which leave the phonetically similar forms semantically more similar, sometimes identical. Note the confusion and lack of contrast in many English dialects for such sets of related words as lie versus lay, sit versus set, etc. 3. Some common semantic shifts typically go in the direction and not in the go in one direction and not in the other. Cases which recur and are found in numerous languages include the following. Words having to do with the sense of touch may typically develop meanings involving sense of taste, sharp, crisp, hot, so we get spicy. 2. words involving the sense of taste may develop extended senses involving emotions, in general, bitter, sour, sweet. It is frequently claimed that semantic shifts typically go from more concrete to more abstract. For example, head, part of body, which is concrete, then head of the institution becomes abstract. In the recent explanatory treatment of semantic change, Traugott and Dacher emphasize the typical direction of certain kinds of semantic change. They identify regular tendencies in semantic change, that is, changes that are encountered frequently across languages and also repeatedly within single languages. They propose an invited inferencing theory of semantic change. Polysemy is central to this theory, and it typically arises out of the pragmatic forces of invited inferences and subjectification. Invited inferences arise in the pragmatic use of language in given context. So far, in this particular module, we have looked at the concept of linguistic sign, how the form and the meaning go together always. Only when they are together they become meaningful or linguistic sign as such. Loss of either will be loss of the word as such. So besides this particular basic point, we have looked at how words in due course of time may be lost, whether they are in association or whether they get drifted away or whether they are in social groups. And further, we have looked at the gamut of various types of semantic changes possible, though basically there are three: expansion, contraction, and meliorization or pejorization. So that is figurative speech basically. And also we have looked in this particular module the various types of metaphors having significance in the language. In fact, man being creative, metaphors are used extensively, particularly in poetry or even in day-to-day conversations to make speech more attractive. So further, we have tried to see some attempts by scholars to provide a direction for semantic changes, though it is quite hard. Also, some scholars have noted that the vocabulary provides some clue to the direction of change, and though as it is based on a few languages, more work needs to be done in this area. Some scholars think that it is possible to provide theories of semantic change on the lines of theories or laws found in sound change, in analogical change, but then more needs to be done because of the very nature of meaning. Thank you.